Hello, and welcome to day 2 of our Thomas Track Pants sew along. So we are going to be sewing a complete basic pair of pants today. So I have a couple of tricks to help you if you're new, maybe you're not new, and you're looking for tricks also. So I'm always looking for tricks for making things easier. So yes, so there's a video on the blog of this same process today, and I made a little mini pair. For this, I am making a full-size pair, so this tutorial I am going to use 2-inch wide elastic and show you guys how I sew that really thick waistband on. So, but I did the same method just without the top stitching with the 1-inch elastic from the video on the blog. So alright, we have a few people. Hi Crystal, and Jessica's here. So I'm using my serger today and my cover stitch. You can do this all on a regular sewing machine. I did it on a standard sewing machine for the blog post. You don't need a serger to sew any of our patterns. You don't need a cover stitch to sew any of our patterns. You can do them all on a standard sewing machine. So I'm using cotton lycra knit and has some dinosaurs on it. I don't remember where I got this, sorry. But you can use knits or wovens for this. We went over fabric options yesterday. Basically any fabric you can use for this pattern. I wouldn't use the heavyweight denim simply because the waistband would get really thick and bulky, but anything from fleece to cotton lycra to athletic fabric to board short fabric, ponte, scuba, so many options. But today I'm using this cotton lycra, and so I've already cut out the pattern pieces. If you'll notice, I have, ooh, that didn't show up very well. Okay, so that's an F, and this is a B. So you'll have 2 fronts and 2 backs. And if you've done it before, you know the most frustrating thing you can do while sewing pants, while sewing the side seam together, is to sew 2 backs together or 2 fronts together. So some things that you're not supposed to together. It's easier to do that when your fabric looks the same on both sides, so like ponte, something like that. It's really easy to do. So I suggest you mark your pattern pieces some way. This is some fabric tape. You can use painter's tape, also any low tack tape, a post-it note, whatever, and you can mark your fronts and your backs so that you can keep them organized. I feel like my camera's sliding. Sorry guys. I want you to see the table, but it is sliding. Okay, that's really high. We'll see how that does. Sorry if I'm making anybody curse. There, that feels a little bit better. I feel like I'm really in your face when it's like cutting me right here and angled funny. All right, so we have our fronts and our backs and our elastic cut. I'm not doing pockets. I'm not doing color blocking on this. This is bare bones, basic pants. This is it. If you want to eliminate, sorry, I've got a thread coming off my cover stitch, so it's bugging me. If you want to eliminate the side seam, there is a blog post, or there's a little tutorial on how to do that on the blog today as well. I think I did all the posts in advance, and I have them confused on which I have which days, but I'm pretty certain that today's was the side seam. So, all right, so I can keep track of lining everything up right. Not only did I mark the fabrics, but I'm going to take my front pieces and open them up and lay them so that the side seams are next to each other. So can you see that? I have 2 fronts here. My backs are in my hand. They've both been marked with the V on both sides, and then I'm going to take my backs, take them apart, and then match up a back side seam to a front side seam, right sides together. So this is a second check, if you will, to make sure that you're sewing the right pieces together. If you pair up your front and back, okay, I don't know if that interrupted anything, sorry. I looked up and I had a call coming through on my phone. So we have, when we divide ourselves this direction, which is your mid-coronal plane, by the way, we have more back here typically than we do in the front. If you're built like me, you have a lot more back there. So versus Thomas, who is straight as a board back there. So we have more of a curve on our back piece than we do on our front. So can you see that? Kind of, sort of. So if we put these two together, this point matches up, but you'll see that this curve is not as deep as this one. So this is our back piece, and that gives us more room for our bottom. And then also the back comes up higher than the front, and again that creates more room so that we're not showing anybody backside that we don't want to show when we bend over and stuff. So it just gives us more room there. So, all right, I'm just pinning these together. You can clip, you can pin, you can skip it if you want. And now we're going to just sew down each of the side seams. So again, I'm going to use my serger. You can use the sewing machine. Either way, you want to use ballpoint needles because we're using knits. Well, if you're using knits, you want to use a ballpoint needle. You might be using a woven. So, and it's drafted with 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to zip down this really quickly. I didn't pin this one, so I'm going to kind of line it up quickly as I go. Flip this one real quick. I always think I can go faster not lining it up and then, or not pinning it, and then it takes me longer. And my kit is all legs. Alright. Phew. There we go. Boom. Alright, no questions so far. Yay! Alright, if you do have a question, just go ahead and post it, and I am happy to answer it. Did you guys see the lovely screenshot that Facebook chose for yesterday's video? Out of all of the videos I've done, I don't think I've ever had a screenshot in a flattering frame. Alright, there we go. So there we have both of our side seams. Now I'm going to remove these tapes because I don't want to forget I have them there, and press them. Okay, so we would want to open this up and press the side seam typically. Hey, I made short T-Rexes. not bad for not intending to have any fabrics lined up. So really you would want to press this side seam. I do even when I'm sewing knits. It makes it nice and easy to work with the fabric and get them to lay the direction that you want. I like to press my side seams to the back usually. Sometimes I do press them to the front, it just depends, but my default is to the back. But I'm not going to worry about pressing it right now. So we're going to take both of our legs, because we sewed 2 legs now, and we're going to open them up, place them right sides together, and we're going to match up this rise seam, the crouch curve, the front rise and back rise, whichever term you want to use. Front rise and back rise are technically what they are. So the shorter one's the front, the larger one's the back. I'm going to clip them this time and hopefully I can sew them faster. Okay, so we're just going to sew right here and sew right there. So we have our 2 legs. What's happened is the 2 individual legs, and they're both opened and right sides together. So at this point we have both of the fronts lined up and both of the backs lined up. The video on the blog, I did this in 2 different fabrics so that you can see how the front and backs line up at specific points in the pattern. So, okay, now I'm sewing, I believe this is the front rise. So there you can see front rise and back rise, and then our side seam going straight down the middle. So if we set that out, that's what you have. So now we're going to sew the inseam. So this is sometimes where people who are new to sewing pants can get a little tricked up, because you're having to refold your fabric in a different way to get it to line up. Because right now we have one side, this is 2 front legs, and this is 2 back legs. So the easiest way to do this is to where you can't see, of course. Let's see. Down here at the hem, there we go. Can you see it? I think if you have comments and anything in your way, you can clear those off of your screen, like you touch a button and the comments go away. So if those are blocking anything for you, you do have that option. So down here at the hem, grab 1 layer and pull it up and fold it in half and match up the outside raw edges. And then just keep, I'm going to pin that, and just walk along folding those together. And then you'll get to the 2 rises and you'll join those 2 rises. So what we've done is we've taken a back leg and a front leg and lined those up. And then go all the way down to the other hem. So when you have these lined up, it should look like a pair of pants. Like, if it doesn't look like a pair of pants after you do that move, something did not get turned correctly. And we're still working with the fabric right sides together. So, there, when we put them like that, you can see how it makes a pair of pants. Just like that. And so now we're going to sew this inseam. So when you get up to where the legs join, right here, don't pivot. If you pivot, you're going to create some bulk, and what will also happen is the fabric will kind of fold on itself funny. When you get to that point, you want to straighten this out. So you want to pull those legs straight when you're sewing that inner part of the leg, the very top of the inseam. You want to pull that straight. Just pull it gently, don't stretch it out of shape or anything. And you have a couple of options with your seam. From the rise, you can put them going in the same direction or put them going in opposite directions, nesting. Nesting them helps them lay flatter, but I like the look of the seams going in the same direction for some reason. So aesthetically, I like them in the same direction. So now we're just going to go and sew that side seam. And I reacted to something. My arm itches. So again, if you're just joining me, I'm using a serger. You don't have to use a serger. Do this on a regular sewing machine if that's what you have. It will work just fine. Sorry, he's long, you guys. He has a 26-inch inseam and he's 9. So these are some long pants. For the record, I'm 5'2" and I have a 28-inch inseam, I think it is. So he's long. Alright, after you sew that, you should have pants. Yay! Now we're going to add the elastic for the waistband. So let's trim these threads up. Okay. So again, I'm going to use my serger for the elastic. You can, if this is your first time doing elastic in this method, baste it with the sewing machine first. You can baste it with a straight stitch, and it's fine. So after you sew these, I do want to point out, see how the back is higher than the front? So this is the back, front's in the front. You want that. So that gives you the room in the seam. So for our elastic, if you've sewn elastic before, oh my goodness, I'm going to be taking some Zyrtec after this. I am an allergic mess all of a sudden. So a lot of tutorials have you overlap your elastic. This one does not. The length of the elastic is cut so that you butt the ends together like this. Don't overlap them. Your elastic will be snug if you do that. Butt them together. What this does is it reduces bulk at that seam. So just put them right up next to each other like that, and then do a zigzag stitch down it a couple times. And it will look like this. So, and you can see it's nice and stable, and there's no bulkiness there. You'll barely feel the seam once you get it all sewn together. So that's how the elastic is. Now we're going to divide this into quarters. So that's four equal sections. You see that in a pattern, it says to divide the collar into quarters, or find the quarter points on the waistband. That what you're doing is you're dividing it into 4 equal portions. So I start at the back with this seam, and that's clip 1 or pin 1, or you can mark it with an ink pen, whatever, just mark it. And then take it and fold it in half, and the opposite side, that's mark 2. So now we have our halves. Now we need to find the other points. So just line up those first two points that we made, and over here on the ends, those are our quarters. So there's one, and right there is two. That's how you find your quarter points. Same method for finding the quarter points of a collar. So that's our elastic. You can see my 4 clips. And now we have to do the same for our waistband. So our first 2 points are really easy. Just use the seam from the front and back rise. Right there. But don't ever assume that your side seams are your quarter points. Depending on how the pattern is drafted, the back piece or the front piece can be wider than the opposite piece. So just like before, match up your points and then just gently, I call it walking it out, walk along the raw edge and find it. So you'll see that it's just slightly off. The front is just a little bit, what is that? Front's more narrow, I think. Front's wider, I don't know. My brain is not working that way right now. But it's just off the side seam. So on this size 10, I think it's that I'm sewing, that quarter point is like a 1/2 inch to the front. So there's our quarter points marked. And now we're going to, I'm trying to think which way I want to work it. I want to work it right side out. So I'm going to turn this right side out. So then I'm sewing with the elastic on top. Just like that. And now I'm going to put the elastic to the wrong side of the fabric and match up the quarter points. So I'm just like that. See how the elastic's going inside? And take the quarter points and line them up. Fabric's rolling on me. Just match all 4. I need to find my water. Okay. And there we go. So after you do that, you'll see that the waistband is not the same length as the elastic. See that? Elastic's much shorter. You want that, especially if you're sewing with woven fabric. You need that excess fabric to get these over the hips. So what we do when we attach the elastic is we're going to stretch. So there, okay. So see, there we go. And stretch it so that the elastic matches the length of the fabric. Don't stretch it so much that you're stretching your fabric. You just want to stretch out the elastic. Same method as when you're sewing a neckband. You stretch the neckband to fit the neckline. Same thing, but this is elastic with the fabric. And you do stretch it a little bit more than you would a neckband. So again, if this is your first time doing this method, sew it with a sewing machine and baste it in place. What we're going to do is attach the elastic directly to the fabric. This is an alternative to sewing a casing and then threading the elastic through and then sewing the ends of the elastic together. I personally don't care for casings. I don't like fishing the elastic through, the elastic twists. I don't care for that method. You can, if you prefer it, by all means, make a casing. Make the pattern work for you, hands down, every time. But I'm going to show you guys how I do it. This really secures the elastic in place. Also, it keeps it from twisting and bending around and everything. So, okay, so I'm going to serge right along this raw edge, but I'm not going to trim anything. If you're doing a sewing machine, sew this with at least a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can do it with 3/8 if that's your habit. That's fine. But if you use the serger, don't trim. You never want to trim the elastic edge with the serger because that breaks up the weave and then your elastic can fall apart. So my first, I would say inch or so. If I'm doing it on the sewing machine, if I'm doing it on the serger, I don't stretch. get a few stitches in place to lock it down. And then after they're secure, if you're using a sewing machine and you have the option to stop with your needle down, do that. It will help you have some control over your fabric as you're adjusting it. My serger doesn't have that option, but I do try to stop with the needle down. It just takes a little bit of practice and technique. So take your fabric, I like to hold back here and then just gently stretch so that the elastic length meets the fabric. I do use 2 hands to feed it in as I'm doing this to help keep it even and keep things from sliding around. Another thing I do, like, I don't know if you can see that I'm doing it, but I keep pulling the fabric over here. What I'm doing is I'm using this lip on my serger to my advantage because knit tends to curl. So I'm taking the fabric beyond that edge and then pulling it back over to use that edge to straighten out the knit that likes to curl under. So if you're wondering why I keep sliding it over there, it's to pull out that curve. Actually, let's go closer. There we go. Since I don't need that table space anymore. Okay. So again, just stretch and right along. And just work in sections. If you're making a larger size, like these are a 10, and you find it easier to work in smaller sections, just keep sectioning off the waistband in even spots. So instead of 4, you would have 8. Okay. And the last. Get it off the curve, I just overlap and then slowly take it off. So you can see where I overlap for, I don't know, maybe an inch, and then I slowly went off the edge of the fabric. So there. Okay. I thought that I missed it, but it's the white dinosaur. Joke's on me. So you can see that it gathers the fabric up, and then when you pull it straight, it's nice and straight. So that is exactly what we want. So now we're going to take our waistband and fold it down. And so what we do is we're encasing that elastic. And actually, I don't like clips for this part, especially with this wide elastic, because we're going to have to re-stretch this as we top stitch the elastic in place. So I like to put in some pins kind of far down. And again, I tend to work in quarters. I pin one side and then the opposite side. And then the side seams. So I'm making sure that I'm folding it straight down by lining up. So there we go. See how I line the side seam up? And then pin it. Ow! Don't pin your finger to your waistband. Okay, and then one more. Nice long pins make this a lot easier too. If you're working with the tiny little 1-inch long pins, you might find that more difficult. Okay, I'm gonna switch machines. You can't do this next part with the serger. So if you don't have a cover stitch, just do it with a regular sewing machine. That's perfectly fine. And you can do this with a straight stitch. You don't have to use a zigzag stitch. You don't have to use that triple stitch or a lightning stitch or anything like that. Straight stitch is all you need for that, this part. So we're going to top stitch the waistband in place. So you can do this on either side. If you want the inside up so that you can see where you're sewing, sew it with the inside up. If you want to top stitch it, then sew with the right side up. It doesn't matter. What does matter is, again, we have to pull that fabric or pull that elastic straight so that we're stitching on a smooth surface. If we don't pull this straight while we're top stitching it down, what will happen is it will have to stretch to get over the hips, and you're going to have pop seams. And it honestly, as much as it needs to stretch to get over the hips, even if you did a zigzag stitch, it still might pop. You must stretch this out while you're sewing it. This part is probably the trickiest part of the whole pattern. It just takes patience. Use as many pins as you want to keep everything straight and in line. Actually, I say that, and I think I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more here myself. So don't rush through it, just take your time. Okay. There's that one that I don't need that clip. Oh, there they are. I lost my pins. I don't use the magnetic cushions or anything. I have bowls, you notice? So they're easier for me to get the pins out of. I have fingers that don't always like to work. So trying to separate the pins that like to stick to each other and everything, just, okay. You can see it, like, especially where it's really gathered, I'm pulling it, putting it against my stomach, and then finding that point that I'm pinning. Okay. So one more trick, if you're wanting to top stitch this, but you don't have a guide on the throat plate, what you can do, I need a bigger piece than that, is take some tape. I lost my tape. That might be the piece that I end up using. I just had to, oh, there it is. It's on my other table. Okay, take some tape and mark a point on your sewing machine as kind of a hem guide. So, like this. I don't know where my hem guide is. Oh, there it is. My foot. Okay, so we know our elastic is 2 inches, but I don't want to go like at 2 inches because then I'm barely catching the elastic. So I'm going to go at, let's say, 1 3/4, and then mark on my machine. Let's put this way. From the edge of the needle there, and then just put the tape down. See that? And now I'll just run the top of the waistband right along that edge, and that will ensure that I keep a straight edge, and then I'm catching my elastic and I'm still top stitching versus, I have to turn this the other way, versus sewing from the bottom, because I don't want a reverse cover stitch look on this. My machine does have a free arm, but I don't use free arms, so I'm turning it inside out so that I can stretch this out and sew it. Okay, I'm trying to find, I like to start at the back seam, and I've lost it. There it is. Okay, we're ready. So, I'm going to remove my needle, slide this under there, position it, and just like before, I sew a little bit without stretching just to get everything really secure and locked. I have confusion on which petal is which. Okay, so I'm going to sew just a little bit and then stretch so that my elastic is stretched out but my fabric is not. Okay, stop, remove the pin, stretch, and again I'm taking this hand, my left hand, and stretching the fabric in the back and kind of securing everything so that it doesn't pull unevenly. Stop, dropped my needle because I'm not as good with getting this one to end. Okay, needle and just work in little sections. This does take patience, but you can do this. This technique is a little bit more difficult with a knit than a woven. Wovens don't shift around so much, and I can zip right through it with a woven. But with this knit, I'm really taking my time. All right, last little section. I always forget to do it. And trim. I read somewhere that you should trim those threads before you overlap them. I don't know. Okay. And one more. And remove this from the machine. Oh, I do need to get the straight machine over here. Just remembered that. Okay, there we go. It's cover stitched in place all the way around, and because I had that tape on there, you can see that it's nice and straight because I used it as a guide, and it's nice and stretchy. Okay, I need to switch machines out real quick here to do that top stitching technique. That this waistband has. Let's get the serger out of here. Okay. Yep, you're still there. Okay. Making sure I didn't mess anything up. Alright, sorry. I forgot about this part. Can you hear me dropping all these clips? Okay. Okay. I got this piece. There's this foot. We're going to do this with aqua thread because I'm not going to take the time to switch it out. Okay. So again, this is done with the straight stitch, which is probably really counterintuitive since we've always told you to not stitch straight seams with, or don't stitch stretch seams. That's hard to say, you guys. Don't stitch stretch seams with a straight stitch. I just created the new tongue twister for the sewing world. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're going to be top stitching directly on this elastic. Again, as we sew, we have to stretch. This does two things. It gives the pants the athletic, sporty look that I absolutely adore. The other thing it does is it keeps this fabric from kind of shifting on the casing because it's such a wide casing. It's not going anywhere. That elastic's not twisting up because it's stitched directly to the seam, but it does keep it more secure. It also kind of stretches out the elastic a little bit. So if you're looking at this and you're like, oh, that elastic's a little snug, what that straight stitch does is it tends to kind of relax the elastic a little. So a long straight stitch, I'm at a 4. Same as always. I start at the back and now I don't know which is the back. To find out, I just grab it by this junction seam at the top of the rise, and the long side is the back. This is our winner. Okay. So again, I'm top stitching. You can do as many rows as you want. I am going to do just one, kind of right in the middle. So I'm going to right there. Okay. So I'm going to sew a couple stitches, set it so it locks down, and stretch it out, and just sew right through the elastic. stop it with that needle down, adjust. You want to make sure that you don't pull your fabric through. Just straighten your fabric, don't pull it. If you pull it, what you can do is move the needle, and then the needle is going to hit your bobbin casing, chip your bobbin casing, and mess up your timing. Don't ask me how I know this. I've only done it like twice. So bobbin casings are cheap, luckily. So just be very careful that you don't pull your fabric through your machine. You're just straightening your fabric, but still allowing your machine to feed it through. Okay, one more section. Oh. Just straightening the elastic out. And not stretching the fabric out. But there, it's an aqua. And it gives that nice sporty look. And there is that waistband. Oh, I love that waistband. So the final thing to do is just to hem our pants. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to actually hem them. It's the same as hemming a shirt. You want to press. You know what? I will hem them. I am going to hem them because we might have people here that have never hemmed a pair of pants. And that is what this is for, right? Okay. I am going to do it back on the cover stitch. If you're just a regular sewing machine, that's fine. Just, you can do it with a straight stitch on a regular sewing machine. So you want to fold that hem in. It has a 1-inch hem. So fold it down 1 inch. And then press. My iron cooled off, so. Okay. That will do. Just flipping it over and pressing the other side really quickly. Okay. So, kicking the pedals. So there, you can see I folded that raw edge down to the inside of the pant 1 inch. I'm going to turn it back inside out. I don't use free arms because my sewing machine doesn't have a free arm. So I'm just not used to using it, even though my cover stitch has one. Okay, and now you're just going to hem that in place. So we're going to be sewing right along, right inside that raw edge. So if you're new, sew with this side up. That's perfectly fine. If you prefer, you can sew with the top side up. It's if you go to the old proper way, it's a top stitch, so you would sew it with the right side up. But if your machine is balanced properly, both stitches should look the same on both sides. So. I remembered to trim my threads this time. And I am guilty of throwing them on the floor. Okay, that's one hem. Trim and release it. the big ones I don't throw on the floor. And there's our hem. And that's the cover stitch hem for you. So it looks like, well, oh, I skipped a stitch. Look at that. All right, but then on the other side, it looks like 2 needles for mine, the way I have it set up. I did totally skip a stitch there. Oh well. Pajama pants. They don't have to be perfect, right? So there is his hemmed leg. They're for it's 9-year-old. I could wear them. They're really long, but I did add a little bit of extra length to them, so because he won't stop growing, and I want these to last him. So that is it. You would hem the other leg, and that is how to sew a very basic pair of pants that has a front piece and a back piece. So any questions at all for me? I haven't had any. I'm not used to no questions, you guys. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have. What are we doing today? So for the sew along, if you're doing the color block, my nose still itches. If you're doing the color block portion today, you would be sewing the accent piece to the front and sewing the yoke to the back and getting that all lined up. Top stitch your seams flat so that they don't irritate or anything. Press them. Even if you don't have any waviness, pressing them after you top stitch really helps set that seam in place and make it look nice and sharp. Tomorrow, pockets. I have a video on the blog tomorrow for how to sew the pocket, because it is a little bit different. It's top stitched in the front so that it doesn't like move to the back and everything. Have you ever done that? Like you put on a pair of pants and that have that side seam pocket and it like flips to the back, and it's all, depending on how they fit, it can be difficult to maneuver it to the front. These pockets don't do that. So I'll sew a pocket live tomorrow for you, and I don't remember tomorrow's hack, if there is one. I don't think I had one every day. I don't remember what it is now. Sorry. It'll be a surprise for us all. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Tomorrow I will be live at 8 p.m. Central Standard. Wait a minute. I might have to change that. This is why I don't schedule these. I might have to change that. I have to talk to my husband and see if he can do the VL1 lesson that I scheduled for tomorrow at 7:30. So I will figure that out this afternoon and get that done. And yeah, so thank you. If you're sewing basic pants and you get them finished today, share a picture. I would love to see them. If you are color blocking and you have that assembled, I would love to see your progress. If you've just picked out your fabric, I would love to see it. So I love to know that you guys are participating with me. So that's all I have for today, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you.